We're going to be focusing on the issue of multiple sclerosis, and we're joined in the studio by Maha, who's the founder of MS Talks. That's a Dubai-based support group for MS patients. Good morning, Maha. How are you doing today?
Hi, how are you?
Very good. It's great to have you here, and obviously the last time we spoke to you was back in October of 2015 or so, and so we're going to find out from you in a few minutes' time where you're at the moment in terms of your treatment and your condition, and get a little bit of an update from you about your personal health, but also about MS Talks as well, and how that has really grown over the last 6 months or so. But also joining us in the studio is Dr. Willem van der Kamp. He's a neurologist from the German Neuroscience Centre. Good afternoon, Doc. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Fine.
It's great to have you here. I'm just going to fess up, like I did to you guys off air, going to fess up to the listener. I don't know a lot about multiple sclerosis. It isn't something that has impacted my family members so far, and you know, it's not something that I've heard a lot about on television or just in the media in general, and so that's why I'm so glad you guys are here to tell me about it, and obviously to inform the listeners as well. So can we begin by just explaining what multiple sclerosis actually is and what that term kind of stands for, Doc?
Well, it's all in the name. In fact, it means that there are multiple spots of inflammation, which gives a hardening of nervous tissue. And multiple means multiple in location, dus in different places in the brain, but also in different spots in time. And it starts with an inflammation. It's a strange disease in which the body attacks its own nerve cells. Or the sheeting of the nerve cells, that gives an inflammation, and that gives a hardening, and that's and the medical term for hardening is sclerosis. So it's multiple hardenings in the brain.
So that's going on in the brain, but what causes it? Do we know that there is a direct cause, or is it just something that happens to some people?
It's an autoimmune disease, as we say. Mm-hmm. So the immune system itself is attacking its own body. And the mechanism after why it's being attacked is quite complicated. There are some risk factors, as we know. Some is in the genes. It's more frequent in one family, than more frequent than in the other, and also the climate is of importance. The amount of infections in your youth, in the first 20 or so years, prime your immune system, and it can change your immune system, and that makes people from certain countries more liable to MS than from other countries.
Right. So if you had a lot of infections when you were young, if there is a history of multiple sclerosis in your family, then you could be much more at risk.
Yeah.
Is there something that people who are listening to this who aren't people who've been diagnosed with MS, can you go to a doctor? Can you get checked out to discover if you've got a chance of developing this?
Now, without complaints, it's not very helpful, and we cannot do a preventive investigation or something like that. And it's also not useful for the biggest amount of people. But if you do have complaints, and they can be vague in the beginning, they can be just tiredness or some tingling, some weakness. It can start with vision problems. If you got any of those complaints, then it's very worthwhile of going to a doctor.
Well, let's find out from Maha. What was the first signs for you? What got you concerned? Why did you go to the doctor?
Well, I actually had my first encounter with the MS when I was about 17 years old. And it's funny you say that, you could just think it's just factors or tiredness or anything, because actually what happened to me is that I started losing eyesight in one of my eyes. And I was 17, it was right after my exams, so my family just thought that I was stressed and that I just needed rest for a couple of weeks. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks into it that I realized that I actually started losing it in both my eyes, and I couldn't see at all. So I went to the doctor and we had the checkups, and I actually didn't show real signs of MS at the time. And the hospital wouldn't put me on medication right away because they said, like you said, it wasn't preventative. So I showed signs when I was about 23. That was when I was diagnosed. I had my first sort of real attack, if you will, and I started showing signs on my scans then. I completely lost motor function on one side of my body, and I couldn't write with my right hand, couldn't smile properly, and that was when I was put on the meds.
You had 6 years between 17 and 23 between getting the first symptoms, first signs that you had this, and then being formally diagnosed. That is a long time to wait. I mean, you must have been scared, and it must have been an upsetting time for you.
I think it was more than anything, it was just very confusing because we never officially had a diagnosis, so I just didn't know what was wrong. And even after I did, the initial year, I would say, was a bit of a roller coaster because, like you, I didn't know anything about MS. And that's part of the reason why MS Talks was set up, is to spread awareness. And one of the things that we always tell people who approach us now is, actually, this is not the end for you. It's just the beginning of a new lifestyle.
Doc, when you are able, in a position to say to somebody, yes, I'm diagnosing that you have MS, what situation are most people in when they come to you? We heard how Maha had vision loss, then 6 years of various consultations before she had the diagnosis. So do people tend to have the similar kinds of symptoms, or do people come in various degrees of this condition?
Now that's a difficult thing for MS, I think, because the symptoms are extremely variable. When it starts with blinding of one eye in a tired young lady, then the diagnosis is not that difficult. But it can be the case that in the first couple of years, indeed, just as happened with Maha, there are quite vague symptoms, and vague means they're medically not specific. It can be some tiredness, a little tingling. Vision is not perfect, but it's not really a problem. It's all in between, and those are the difficult years. And once you tend to listen to it with a neurological eye, I must say, I'm looking at the eye now, then it's a much easier question, of course. But first you have to reach a neurologist.
That time that it can take to have that 100% diagnosis, does that have an impact then upon quality of life for people with MS later on? Would life be better if you could diagnose it far quicker and say, yes, you've got this condition, now we can start definitely treating these symptoms?
Now that's a difficult question. Since you got to have a diagnosis first you got to prove that the people really have MS. Once you have a blinded eye, but the MRI scan is normal, so there are no spots in the brain, then you may not call it multiple sclerosis, but you have to use the term clinical isolated syndrome. That's the first thing, which in half of the people will get to MS, but not in everybody. So it's no use wanting to treat everybody like they're having MS, but you have to pick out the people who are at risk.
It sounds like quite a complicated disease. I mean, if it took 6 years to diagnose breast cancer, for example, then we'd have a lot more people, not getting treatment in time and so forth. What is being done or can be done to diagnose MS quicker? Because that doesn't sound like a satisfactory situation to me for sufferers of MS where they're waiting so long for a diagnosis.
Now, that's not really my point. When you look at the blind eye, only half the people will get MS. Mm-hmm. And you start to treat them. You started to treat them when they really had it, and now there is a school, is a group which is getting bigger, that we have to give medication as early as possible.
And also, I mean, this was when I was 17, so the medical industry has made incredible advances since then in diagnosing MS and also treating it. So it's pretty incredible when you think about the progress that has been made.
We're joined in the studio by Maha Mahoon. She's a founder of MS Talks, and Dr. Willem van der Kamp as well. He's a neurologist from the German Neuroscience Centre. Maha Mahoon is the founder of MS Talks, a Dubai-based support group for patients with MS, and Dr. Willem van der Kamp is a neurologist from the German Neuroscience Centre. And you were mentioning before in the first part of the show, Doc, that there are trends, so to speak, of where you can see people who are getting MS, and one of them is in hot countries. The hotter the country, you will see more patients with MS. Had a text here from Omar, says, is it true that heat is a main cause of MS? If so, how does Canada have the highest rate of MS patients, or is it caused by extreme temperatures, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold?
That's good. That's a good question. First, I would like to point out that not in the warmer countries you see it more frequent, but in the colder countries.
In the colder countries.
And it means in the northern parts of Europe, in the northern states of the United States. And as I just said in the previous part, we feel that the more frequent infections of airways in youth give more chance for MS. On the other hand, it is the case that some people feel worse in the heat than in the cold, because in warm temperatures it's more obvious that your nervous system doesn't work well. So. And as for the cause of MS, we think we know it's an autoimmune disease. So heat will not be the cause of it, but it will be a factor which influences how people experience it. And in the heat, it feels worse for most.
Well, I hope that answered your question, Omar. If anyone else has got a question about MS, please do text us on 4001. Maha, what's your day-to-day life like now? Because we chatted to you on this programme back in October, and you're telling us about your condition there and your organisation MS Talks. How has life changed for you over the last 6+ months or whatever it is now? It's almost a year, isn't it? But how has life changed?
I think one of the things about MS, and one of the reasons why it's so difficult to be diagnosed with it, is because it is genuinely an invisible illness. So people see me every day and I just look like an average girl. You know, I go to work, I hang out with my friends, it's just normal. But actually what I'm dealing with is a whole array of spectrums of symptoms that people can't even see, you know. When
you walked into the studio today, I didn't know what sort of symptoms you might be displaying. I wouldn't have a clue that you had MS to look at you sat there.
Exactly, that is one of the issues, is that I just look like a normal person. But actually, you know, I can't tell you that I suffer every day, because that's actually not true, because I manage my condition through obviously medication and also the food that I eat and the type of lifestyle that I sustain. But I do struggle in the heat really badly. Everybody struggles in the heat, but I think MS patients understand it on a different level. I do go through days when I wake up and my fingers are tingling and I don't know why. I get the worst fatigue you could possibly think of. I can't even get out of bed. But one of the things that we always try to advocate is living well with MS. So while I completely think that medication is important, there is an element of lifestyle that really impacts how your disease progresses. And whether that is the nutrition, fitness aspects, stress levels, staying away from the heat, the type of exercise that you do, it all matters, I believe.
The symptoms began for you when you were 17. You eventually lost partially the sight in one of your eye, or completely the sight in one of your eyes.
In both eyes, actually.
Both eyes. You're looking at me. You've obviously got your eyesight back. You lost movement on the left-hand side of your body, and there you are walking, and you know, I can't see any issues. So how good is the treatment, is the medication? Like I said, I wouldn't have a clue that you had a condition.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the doctor can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, every disease, every attack will take its toll, and then it will subside, and your body will acclimatize to a new baseline. So I'm looking at you, but I don't have 20/20 vision eyesight. I'll probably never fly a plane, which I'm okay with. But I think what I've done over the past few years, and what I think has really impacted my condition, is seriously changed the way that I eat. So I used to eat really unhealthy, which is typical of someone working full-time in Dubai. But when I started incorporating foods that were naturally anti-inflammatory into my diet, I started seeing a huge effect. I haven't had an attack in the past 4 years. And that is, I believe, a combination of lifestyle and medication.
What's your take on that, Doc? Can lifestyle and combined with the medication help to that extent?
Yeah, it's proven that some factors are very important, like smoking, which can give a more rapid disease track, more or less. Food is difficult. Some people experience a very good effect of changing their diet. It's very hard for doctors to prove and to find out why that is true. But I think, as you said a few moments ago, that it's important to realize that MS is a disease of attacks. And during an attack, you can be very ill in days or weeks, and then the attack subsides, and people are almost back to normal. Can be almost back to normal. They can have a residue as well. And during an attack, people can be very ill, but in between the attacks, people can do a lot of things normally.
In terms of diet specifically, like you said, there's no sort of proof that a particular diet will have a particular impact. But would you offer dietary advice to a patient with MS? Would you say you should think about doing this type of thing, changing your diet in this way?
No, I think it's important people think about diet in general. They should eat healthy, and they should stabilize their life as much as possible in respect to sleep, to rest they take, and also to the intake of different foods. But there is no certain cure which is true for everybody.
Yes, yeah. You obviously, Maha, are the founder of MS Talks, and so you deal with people who are suffering from MS, and they all have their own different experiences of what works and does not work for them. What have you found in terms of diet and just other sort of lifestyle changes that people say this has really helped me as a sufferer of MS?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about diet and nutrition and the types of foods that you eat. So there are certain foods that are MS friendly. There's a lot of research done around it, and I think everybody needs to just try different things and see what works for their condition, because MS is so unique that each patient is different. I personally am a big advocate of exercise. Before I was diagnosed, I used to love going for a run. But actually what that used to do to me after the diagnosis is just get my body to overheat, and I would just feel really unwell and I didn't know what was wrong. But when I started doing the right kind of exercises, by keeping my core muscle strong, I find that my body just feels a lot stronger, even on days when I wake up and I'm spasming. I think stress levels, sleep, stopping shisha in my case, but smoking in general, it has made a massive difference to how I feel every day.
In terms of the group itself, how important is that support structure for yourself and for the other members of the group?
It's actually been pretty incredible. So there was no known MS support group when I started this entire project. And I got in touch with German Neuroscience Center on a whim, and I didn't think anyone would even be interested, but they've been unbelievably supportive. And I remember on the day we did our first talk, which was October last year, we expected 3 or 4 people, and we actually had 54 people attend. I would say at the very least 3/4 of them were patients who came with family or spouses. And everybody walks away from all of our events saying, thank you for doing this. I needed to know that there were other people out there. So we had someone at our last event, she was diagnosed 15 years ago, and she'd never met an MS patient before.
Wow.
15 years she thought she was on her own.
Been living here in the UAE.
Living in the UAE.
Why do you think that is? I mean, is there? I'm assuming that there is plenty of information on the internet, and sort of international organisations as well. And yet, yours was the first organisation here in Dubai.
Yeah, I mean, you say the internet, but actually I think that the internet is the problem. So I know that when I was diagnosed, I went to Google, because that's just what you do.
Doctor Internet.
Yeah,
yes.
And the conclusion that I reached was that I was going to die.
Right.
Whereas in reality, that's not the case. It's a lifestyle condition. And all you need to do is alter your lifestyle to suit your condition.
We're joined in the studio by Maha Mahoon, founder of MS Talks, Dr. Willem van der Kamp as well, neurologist from the German Neuroscience Centre, looking at a condition called multiple sclerosis. I'm finding out about it because I had no idea, really. Obviously, it's one of those things that you hear about it. It's a condition that you hear about, but I just don't think necessarily a lot of people actually know what their condition is. And when you speak to people, Doc, for the first time, and you say, look, we think that there's possibly, we're going to test for this, we think you might have this condition. Do people need to be told what it is, or do you find people already kind of understand what MS is?
No, people got strange ideas about it, or ideas which are not fully true. Some people believe it's muscle problems, others it's nerves, for others it's brain disease. But many people heard the term MS, but many people don't know what it means. So there's a lot of explaining that we have to do indeed.
A text here from Dina says, how do you know when you're having an attack? Is there a time frame that you should be looking at? How do I know when I need to go to the hospital? Do you want to start, Doc?
Most of the people with MS have experience with it, so a first attack is always difficult. But an attack comes on in hours, in days, and gets slowly worse, and it means it gives you the tingling, it gives you the weakness, it gives you sometimes vision problems, slurred speech, movement problems, coordination problems. So it's a complex of symptoms which comes on in hours to days, and once you had it once, you know what it is.
You know what the signs are. Maha, in your case, how do you know when you're having an attack?
I agree that you just know. I think in the beginning, it's very common to just have a sense of panic about everything. So I used to say, oh, my eyelashes hurt. Oh my God, it must be the MS. But actually I learned over time to just take a beat, really, and just get to know my condition, get to know the extent of how bad it can get. And from what I understand is, if it's the first time I had an attack, I think after I was diagnosed, I went to the doctor right after I felt something, and he actually sent me home, and he said, give it 24 hours, and if you still feel like something is wrong, come back.
And how did you feel being sent home? Because you obviously gone to the doctor because you're worried.
I was convinced the doctor didn't know what he was doing, and that I was right, and I went to Google again, which was probably not the best of ideas. But actually, after 24 hours, it subsided in that, and I was pretty much back to normal, and I didn't need to take the medication.
In terms of somebody watching you whilst you're having an attack, what would I see if you couldn't speak to me? What would I see anything physically? Would you be shaking? What would be happening?
No, well, it doesn't quite work that way. I think it doesn't go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. It's something that progresses over time. So I'll wake up one day, I'll feel a little bit numb, and the next day it won't be just my fingers, it'll be my whole hand, and then after a few hours I'll feel like my whole arm is going numb, and that's when I know, okay, something's wrong, because it's actually spreading.
Keep your questions coming into 4001. Omar texted in, says, after 40 years of age, can a patient become MS-free? I hear it affects people from ages 15 to 40. Does it decline or fade away after 40 years of age, Doc?
It doesn't fade away. What can happen when people get older, that the attack frequency goes down, and you get to a kind of stable stage of the disease, but it will never die out. It will never go away. And once you have the inflammation in your brain, and that's good to realize that during such an attack, you get the complaints of the dizziness, of the spasticity, that there is an active inflammation in your brain. That inflammation cools down, and that becomes a hardened spot, a sclerosis spot. But the idea is that it gives a little damage to the brain, and you can accept a lot of damage. But once it gets too much, then complaints will not go away anymore.
Another question here from Ashok says, what is the full form of an MS? Of MS. So I guess that question is kind of asking, if somebody's had MS all their life, maybe they're now, in their elder years, what would their lifestyle look like? What would their abilities be? Would they have restricted movement? What's their general condition going to be like, Doc?
That depends on the spots of the inflammation and of the amount of residual damage. After an attack, you can have some residual damage, and that means that the coordination of your muscles will not get perfect again. And as a result of that, you can walk with a high tension in your legs, a high muscle tension, and that's what we call spastic legs, meaning that you have to shuffle a bit more, that you cannot run anymore. Sometimes that you cannot make small movements with your hand, that your handwriting is not good. Eating can become a problem, and in some people, vision can become a problem. And during the attacks, all those things are worse, but in between attacks, and that's a kind of baseline where you're talking about. Then that's what important for the people for the daily life. And after 40 years of MS, there can be a lot of damage. Yeah.
What do you see as being your future with MS, Maha? Because obviously you're a very positive person. You've put this organisation together. You're trying to spread awareness, raise awareness in the UAE, and we're going to talk about that in a moment as well. But how do you see your future and managing your condition?
I think I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. I don't know where the condition will go, what turn it's gonna take, but I do know that it's up to me as the patient to take control of how I live my life. And if the way I live my life, will make the MS worse, then I can only assume that the MS will get worse. But I think if I take control of it and try to at least do what is within my reach, then I can definitely manage the condition.
Keep the questions coming into 4001. We'll deal with some more of those in a moment. Let's look, though, at some statistics regarding multiple sclerosis in the UAE. How severe is the issue of MS in this region, Doc? Should we consider ourselves as one of the regions with sort of a high risk for MS?
Yeah, we thought because it was warm here that it was a low risk area, but there is very few research on this subject. But now we're seeing that it's a medium to high risk, and it might be increasing even. And then we're talking about 55 per 100,000 people having MS. And the population of Dubai is 2.4 million roughly now. So that means 1,300 people suffering from MS in different stages.
Yes, and that's an increase, or it would appear to be an increase.
Now there is very few research done on this subject, but it looks like it's increasing indeed. Yeah.
And what about your experience of that then, Maha? I mean, are more and more people now coming to this organisation? Are you seeing an increase?
I am, definitely. Also, I think it's partially because word is spreading, but also I think what a lot of people try to do is just find other people who are like them. So we actually get a lot of, almost every day I would say, I get at least 1 or 2 emails saying, I've just been diagnosed and I Googled it and I found you, so what can I do?
I mean, the average age I'm reading here of onset is 26, and there's more female sufferers of MS rather than men. It's a 2.8% ratio to 1, so 2.8 women to 1 man. And how do those statistics kind of apply when you look at your particular group? Is it a lot more women than men? Is it a sort of a ratio of almost 3 to 1?
I would say that, yeah.
And in terms of age as well, would you agree that just from anecdotal talking to the people that are in your group, that 26 or in the 20s is the age when it's sort of onset? Yeah,
I believe so. We get a lot of people in their early 20s, and then the vast majority is in their late 20s. There's a few people in their 30s and 40s, but majority of people we get are definitely in their 20s.
Doc, if I was having a conversation with you now today and you'd run all the tests and you were going to tell me that I had MS, what would you say to me? What would you be saying to me about what I need to do in the future and what I can expect from my life? What are some of the common questions that you get asked by people when they have that consultation with you? Yeah,
they ask a lot of questions which I cannot answer, because the disease is so extremely variable, and everybody gets a different advice, because everybody's got a different intensity of inflammation. The amount of white spots as we see on the MRI scan is important, but also the speed of the progression is important to give an advice. And luckily for some people, disease is not very active. Not everybody gets in a wheelchair, and it's very good to realize.
It's one of those conditions that I'm guessing I'm going to have a regular checkup for. You mentioned the MRI scan to see how it's progressing. It's one of those things you're going to have a regular appointment and get good or bad news. It appears to be progressing, or it appears to be fairly dormant. It's not many changes.
MS is a clinical diagnosis, as we say, so it depends on the story of the people, the history, the findings, and other investigations help a little bit. They don't give a diagnosis; they aid in the diagnosis. So when you have the vague complaints and an abnormal MRI scan, then it can point towards MS.
The group members of your group, Maha, do you find that they are in general satisfied with the explanation that they get from their various doctors around the UAE, around the cities, the Emirates of the UAE, or do they always have questions which they just don't really feel like they have the answers to?
I think they always have questions, and that's very normal in this circumstance. But I think a lot of people just want to know what they can do. We always get two questions. So the first one is what's going to happen to me, which we can't really answer. But what we can answer is the second one, which is what can I do? I think that a lot of people are just very confused, and they don't really have anywhere to go, and that's what MS Talks is. I think in the future, one thing we'd really like to be is, so every patient who gets diagnosed gets what is called an MS pack.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a holistic lifestyle agenda, if you want to call it, for them to live their lives, and that is alongside, of course, their medication.
We've had a lot of questions in today, actually, a little bit more than I was expecting to have in, because I like I said, my knowledge of this condition was minimal. Hadn't heard a lot about it, in the press, or just in general in media, and yet, as you guys are pointing out, it does appear to be a condition that is going from sort of medium to high here in the UAE. More and more people seemingly are getting this condition, and we probably have around 13,000 people with MS right here in Dubai alone, and then not to mention the other Emirates as well. There is a support group in place. It's called MS Talks. The founder is Maha, and she's here with us in the studio. And Dr. Willem van der Kamp is a neurologist from the German Neuroscience Centre. And MS is what you do. You deal with people with MS all the time. Questions coming in. Inas says, does taking medication regularly prevent attacks?
It doesn't prevent all attacks, but it prevents part of the attacks, or makes them less heavy. So it's and we feel it's improving the outcome as well. Okay, that is the answer to that one. Keep your questions coming in, 4001. We do like to take calls on this show as well. Shiraz joins us on the line now. Good afternoon, Shiraz.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, how are you doing? What would you like to ask the guys?
Hello, I would say hello doctor, hello Maha ma'am. My name is Shiraz, and I've been suffering from MS since my early 20s, but I got diagnosed on 2007, and last month I visited my doctor at City Hospital. He said that no medication would work on me, including Tysabri and other medications he mentioned. And he said by next year I would be on a wheelchair. And I have a job, I have to support my family. I don't know what to do. Can you please advise me something?
Thanks for calling in, Shiraz. Doc, what would you say to Shiraz?
I can imagine it doesn't feel well with you. This is a very complex question, and it's very hard to answer here on the microphone, because I need to have the whole story, of course, and it's important to see which medication you used and how the stage is. But personally, I feel it's very difficult to tell to people that they might be in a wheelchair next year, because I cannot look into the future, and for me that's a very hard thing to say.
It must have been difficult hearing that, Shiraz. I mean, how are you and your family coping with MS?
Well, currently I was using Abagio for the past 1 year, and when doctor said that, I stopped it, and ever since I didn't use any. And he did prescribe me vitamin D. It was like 50,000 IU. and I take that once a week, and apart from that, I'm not using anything. But since yesterday, I was feeling like I'm going through an attack, and I was at work this morning, and I was holding the pen was like holding a 5-kilo dumbbell, you know. I could not write, and I asked for a day off, and I came home, and I don't know where to go. Yes, there's this medication, it's called prednisolone. I took 2 capsules of that to make it some better, but I guess it didn't work, steroids. I don't know what to do. Other than that, I don't use any other medication.
Well, Shiraz, thanks for your call. Obviously, just to let you know, if you've been listening to the programme, you do know that there is this support group now. It's called MS Talks.
Yes.
We'll just get the doc's view in just a second, but before he tells us, gives us his view, Maha, just let Shiraz know how he can get in touch with MS Talks.
Hi, Shiraz.
Hi.
You can get in touch with us through our Facebook page. It's called MS Talks. Otherwise, you could email interestedmstalks@gmail.com, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, all right, sure.
Well, I hope that helps. I'll take you offline there, and we'll get the opinion of the doc.
I think that if you feel that you might have relapse, that you should seek contact with your doctor. And if the medications which you take orally, the tablets that you take do not work, then there's a bigger chance that the intravenous medication works. So I think it's good to get in touch with your doctor when you don't feel well, especially at this stage.
It's a very emotive one, isn't it? I hope that helped you, Shiraz. I mean, and it must. And it's terrible for anybody, whatever condition you have, to be told, we think that it's going to degenerate and you're going to be in, a wheelchair next year. That is hard news to take. As you said, Doctor, it's hard to predict that kind of thing because you don't have a crystal ball, and it does appear just from, chatting to you guys over the last 50 minutes or so that. This is a condition that is very changeable. It's very specific to the individual. There's no set plan. Like I said, if you diagnosed me today, you couldn't say, right, in 6 years you'll be like this, and in 20 years you'll definitely need to, have extra support, because it's specific for every individual, Doc.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing, and that's why I feel that early diagnosis is important as well. And once you don't feel well or you recognize some of the complaints, then it's good to get in touch with a neurologist and to let him give you advice about treatment, early treatment, treatment for the relapses, which you can do with corticosteroids. But we also have different types of treatments for the longer term, trying to prevent relapses or to make them less severe. And there are multiple types of it, all with advantages and disadvantages. And especially for the people with aggressive MS, that's a very hard question, of course, because we cannot take that away, but we can help a bit, and we can do as good as we can. But give us a choice. It
seems to me, Maha, that you must have had to make decisions over the last few years about what treatment you want to have. You've obviously made your lifestyle decisions, which you told us about, but when it comes to medication and so on and so forth, you have to make decisions as well about how much medication you want to take, this one versus this one. Some people would say this one works, other people are saying this one works. There's no clear-cut solution, is there?
No, there isn't, unfortunately. But actually, I do believe that it's every patient's right to understand all the different medications that are out there and to decide which one works best for him or her, and to, maybe if one doesn't work for you, you have the right to say, this one's not working for me, I need another one. Yeah.
Well, it's been 6 years since you had your diagnosis, and then before that, another 6 years since you first had the symptoms. So it's been a long journey for you. How do you feel with the last couple of minutes just remaining of the program? How are you feeling? Are you feeling positive, not only about your own life and your own treatment of the condition, but also about the community of support network that you're building here for people with MS?
I actually feel very positive, if I'm honest, in the midst of a very negative situation, really. But I think that there's an incredible community out there that seems to want to come together, and that's the most important part. It's time for the MS community to speak out. There's been some incredible institutions out there that have been so supportive of everything that we've been doing, and some of them are doing their own things independently, and that's great. The advances in the medical industry have been incredible, and I think it's time for this community, for the MS community, to come together, to change in Dubai, in the UAE, across the entire region, and to truly support each other.
And what form would that change take? If you could sort of pick one thing, is there something that you would like to see happen? Whether it's just sort of cover radio presenters like myself knowing enough about the condition that I don't have to ask you when you first come in, what is MS? Or is there like a target that you would like to achieve?
I would like to have patients feel more empowered, and for MS to get to a point in terms of awareness where when a patient is diagnosed, they're not shocked by the news and they don't need to go to Google. They already have an idea of the condition. They already have systems in place to be able to get the kind of advice that they need from every angle.
What about you, Doc? What would you like to see change and develop for people with MS? Can you see a future as medication improves and treatment improves? Can you see a brighter future for people with the condition?
I think that the future will be brighter, because now we're in the stage that we're trying to make medication to prevent the damage, and to find out whose immune system is not working well. Try to change that, try to correct that, and that's the phase of the new medication. So things will be changing, but not for this generation of people with MS. It will be later, but it will come.
That's good news. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. Doc, you wanted to just say one last quick thing there?
You spoke about 13,000 people in Dubai with MS, but it will be 1,300.
1,300, excuse me.
Also a large number, but less luckily.
Thank you for correcting my figures there, 1,300. Thank you guys for coming on the programme, much appreciated. Maha Mahoon, founder of MS Talks. Just remind us once again, if people want to get in touch with MS Talks, what's the best way to do that, Maha?
So there's a Facebook page, MS Talks on Facebook. It's actually a public page, so even if you don't have a Facebook account, you can view everything on there. It's kind of our main platform at the moment. We post a lot of articles and videos and just things for patients to understand more about the condition on there. And of course, you can get in touch with myself and other patients through the platform. Also, you can email interested@mstalks. At the moment, we're not doing anything because of the summer, but we do plan on picking things up after the summer. Right now, I've been doing a lot of one-on-one meetings, so if you do like to meet, please get in touch.
Perfect. That's how you can get in touch with Maha. Thank you very much for coming on the programme again, updating us. Much appreciated. Thank you to Dr. Willem van der Kamp as well, neurologist at the German Neuroscience Centre. Get yourself down there and you can get in touch with him if you have any further questions.